What's happening, financial coaches? It's Pete here. Hey, want to talk to you about a topic that's come up a couple times for me. Sometimes I've had to bring it up, but it actually kind of makes me flash back to when I was a kid. My mother was working in a ministry that worked with troubled families, families dealing with family issues, financial issues, those types of things. And one of the issues was that they were helping support this family financially, but the family had a couple of big dogs, and those big dogs were at that time almost $300 a month to just feed, not even including medical bills, vaccinations, all that kind of standard stuff. So when you think about something that is costing you $4,000 a year, easy thing to say is like, hey, that's a want, not a need. That's a luxury item. You should do what you need to do to rid your budget of it. Well, that's hard, and especially for you that may have had pets. I've had a dog in the past. They were like family to me. Not everyone treats a pet like that, but that is really, really tough. It's a really, really tough subject to broach with people who are in financial difficulty. And so I wanted to kind of talk about some of the things that I've used over the years when I have worked with people that have had pets and they just weren't able to kind of make ends meet anyway. So it's not always a situation of whether they have to get rid of the pet or anything, but it's just kind of one of those things where you have to talk about it. You have to figure out, is this something that, we can come up with a strategy to deal with, right? So first of all, the hardest probably decision in my mind is the giving up of the pet. And this absolutely happens. We have a shelter near us that have dogs come in, and I support them. And so one of the things that ends up happening is sometimes you get a senior dog, a pet that has been a part of a family for a long time, and families make a decision. I'm sure it is a tough decision, maybe an impossible decision, to give up that pet, to say, hey, this has been a family member. It's been someone that we have, loved and adored for many years, and to kind of give them up. And so I can't imagine the difficulty that must bring to a family. But tough times may call for extreme measures, and when you don't have any other choice, and certainly giving up a pet, it probably is not going to be the solution to it. There's probably going to still be a lot of issues, because I can't imagine giving up a pet and saying, hey, all right, that gets us cash flow positive or something, and that's the end of it. So I have a feeling it's probably one of the things that just happens in the midst of many, many difficult things. So it does happen, and you can talk to people about that, and maybe they're willing to do that. The other thing that I would say, as opposed to giving it up to a rescue or a pet shop or something like that, that will try to find a new home with a new owner, maybe you have a situation where you can give up the pet to someone in your family. Before I go on to that, I just realized that Sylvester Stallone actually sold his dog. Actually, after Rocky came out, and this is a story that he's told a number of times, but after he made his money on the movie Rocky, he went back and overpaid to buy his dog back from the guy he sold it to. So people do give it up. You don't have to be just an everyday person. You can be a budding celebrity to have to do that. But the other option here, option two, is to give it up to someone else in your family. Now, this is probably going to be a little bit tricky, because you're going to have to obviously share with them the reason that you are doing this. And I think it also behooves you to come up with some ground rules for what's going to happen if you are expecting that pet to be returned at some point. So maybe you have an uncle that you can confide in. Maybe it's your parents or some other family member, maybe a more of a distant family member that doesn't have money issues, that loves pets, that has an open field for them to play in, that will be willing to treat them the way that you like them to be treated, maybe has the financial wherewithal to take care of them. All these things are important. But then on top of that, it's probably going to be important to have that conversation about not just saying, hey, can you take my pet? But, can you take my pet because we're having some financial difficulties? And I think it's important to say that, one, so that, they can be empathetic and passionate about it. But two, if you are going to come up with a timetable for hopefully taking that pet back, they have to be aware of that. Maybe you just need to find that new job and get back on your feet, and maybe you can take that pet back in a year. Maybe it's a more open-ended. So one of the things that I don't want is for you to hand off a pet thinking that that's not going to be a permanent arrangement for someone, and they think it might be permanent, and so they're heartbroken when you have to take it back, or that the timetable, may be more fluid than you expect, and so they may expect to be only housing a pet for 6 months or a year, and it turns into multiple years, right? And that can kind of change the dynamic as well. I know some people who have just been relocated for their job, gone overseas and had to have a family member take over the pet. And it was just a situation where we're going to be overseas for a year working, or somewhere where I can't have a pet. And can you take care of the pet? And there's that expectation to take the dog back. Sometimes they have found that the dog has taken to the new family and the other pets and all that stuff so much that they just decide to get a new pet and not go back to their old dog, or cat or hamster, whatever it might be, right? So a family member can be a good one because you can kind of trust them more. They might be more sympathetic to your situation. They might be more flexible. But like I said, I think it's important to set up the ground rules early, set expectations early. Paula from the Afford Anything podcast has a really awesome phrase. I use it a lot for other things here, but you can afford anything, not everything. And why I think that's important is because if you really want to keep that pet, if that's a top priority, if it's a higher priority for you to keep your family unit together, because maybe that pet is your child in your mind. Maybe that pet has gotten you through some tough situations. Maybe that pet is nearing the end of its life and you want it to finish life with you, whatever it might be, right? If that's your top priority, you can make anything that you want work, but you can't make it all work. So this is where I also kind of go back to this values discussion, these priorities discussions about saying, listen, how important is it? Are you willing to sell your home and downsize into an apartment? Are you willing to not only downsize out of your apartment, but to move into a rural area where you will have to drive 90 minutes each way to work, right? Because you can start moving some of these levers to figure out how you can continue to afford your pet. And you might be surprised as a financial coach how willing people are to go to extremes to keep their pet, because I certainly would have been, right? I mean, there were, as my dog aged, she had diabetes, she had blindness and cataracts and all these things. And, there was really no length that I wouldn't have gone to kind of make her life easy at the end. So, people will be willing to do that. And what you can't do as a financial coach is say, hey, that doesn't make any sense to sell your car, to sell your home, to give up, a good job or whatever it might be, right? But some people might be willing to do that, and it's helping them figure out what their priorities are and then helping them execute on that, right? So you can afford anything, but not everything. And if you want to be able to keep that pet, you can do it, right? But it might mean that you're both eating dog food or cat food, right? So those are the types of things that I go through when I'm talking to people, and I realize, hey, you are in a tough financial spot and you have a pet, and that pet is kind of expensive, and because of the age of that pet, it's going to become more and more expensive, right? And we can even dive into some of the details here about pet health insurance and some of those other things, because there might be a financial product out there that's a good fit for them. At some age you can't get those, but it's how important is it to you? How important is it to you to keep your pet? Because maybe you can keep it, but you'll have to make some decisions on what you're willing to sacrifice. So that's really part of some of the thinking that I go through with people, and part of that is helpful because they see sometimes these extremes. And I think sometimes as a pet owner, you just kind of block out some of these extreme as something that you'll never do. You'll never give up the pet. You'll never send it to the pound. You'll never give it to a family member. Well, all right. If that's the case, and you're willing to admit that, then we have to make some hard decisions on some other things. So I would love it if people can afford their pet and keep their pet. Sometimes that's just not going to happen. But as a financial coach, what I want to do is try to at least talk through what can be a difficult process to come up with a difficult solution. So hopefully that helps. I'll talk to you later.